I'd never been to a five-star restaurant before, and I have to say that for a pamperer like me, it felt like foreign territory. I was damn lucky to find a table, but apparently the five-star hotel that houses the five-star restaurant reserved tables for its guests. Of course, the fact that it was a Monday evening in the middle of winter also helped. The haughty waiter grinned contemptuously at my jeans and polo shirt, but nothing, not even his rudeness, spoiled my mood. So, you must be asking yourself, what the hell was a scruffy salesman doing miles away from home in such a posh place? Well, of course, I was there to meet my wife. The problem, however, was that she didn't know it yet. I strongly suspect that if she had known, she wouldn't have enjoyed the evening's entertainment even close. Sarah and I are both 45 and have been married long enough for both of our children to escape the hen house. I didn't marry above my station, but that's just the way it worked out over time. I made money with my craft while Sarah worked as a paralegal. As a wedding gift, I paid for her to go back to school and get her law degree. She finished just in time to have our first child, an accidental pregnancy, then stayed home until our youngest was 10 before starting to practice her craft as the youngest lawyer at Peter Walker and Associates. Since then, she has remained a good and attentive mother and wife, slowly climbing her way up the corporate ladder, and was now a corporate law specialist at the same firm. A good and attentive wife and mother, that is, until the kids left home. As soon as our youngest flew out of the nest, Sarah, to my great disappointment, went headlong into her career, just when I thought we should take it easier and reconnect. I'm talking about the fact that she averages 4 late nights a week at the office and brings work home not only on weekdays but also on weekends. This has led to quite a few arguments, as you can imagine. Unsuccessful arguments that I kept losing. It turns out that Sarah really wanted to make partner before her 47th birthday, and my wishes seemed to mean nothing. She even apologized for the amount of work she brought home almost every night, assuring me that it was just a phase and she still loved me as much as ever. I'm certainly no mind-reading genius, but I believed her. At first I believed her when she said, "I'll be done with all this by 8, Dave. Then we can watch something or go to bed early." But after about the 10th time, I stopped paying attention to those assurances. I told her more than once that we were drifting apart. Each time I said this, she would deny it as best she could, be more attentive for a few days, and then go back to her new normal. To reinforce my point, I started popping into the pub on the way home 2 or 3 times a week in the evening with some of my work colleagues, even having lunch there as well. Returning home, I would hear an absent-minded, "Hi, honey," and evidence that she had picked up a sandwich for herself. Then she would dive back into her work. I then started going out on weekends when she was working from home. After a couple weeks not getting much response, I started just leaving the house without saying a word to her. She did have the nerve to reprimand me for being absent during dinner and missing a meal she had prepared. That was the first time I suggested we think about counseling. She got really pissed off, and at one point told me that we'd be as close as ever. She'd have tons of time once she got a partnership, and what a bastard I was for not supporting her career ambitions. Apparently, she's forgotten who paid for her to get her law degree in the first place. As if that wasn't enough, the next week her company had a Christmas party. After years of me trying to dodge attending and her begging me to go, this year demonstrated a complete change in attitude. I, wanting to reconnect with my wife, wanted to go. She advised me not to go. This was enough to make me suspicious of her motives, and so, obviously, I insisted on going. She reluctantly agreed. As usual, she laid out my best, only suit, then adjusted my collar and tie, lastly asking if I'd changed my mind. Not 15 minutes after the party started, I decided that my wife was trying to increase her social standing in life, and being seen with the gorilla in the suit that is me was probably not helpful. Upon entering, she headed to the bar and quickly bought me a glass of white wine, which I just as quickly returned and exchanged for a beer. No one else was drinking beer. Being the good spouse that I am, I blended in with the crowd. There has been a good turnover of staff since the last of these events I attended. I have to say, I quickly realized who was the most important by the speed with which Sarah interrupted us as soon as I started talking to them. I got the distinct impression that she thought they would think the worst of her if I told them she was married to an uncouth bum. Did that piss me off? Hell yeah. After all, because of my humble job, she graduated from freaking law school. Eventually, I asked her if I should take a cab home. Not surprisingly, she readily agreed. Obviously, she looked down on me and increasingly ignored me, and I began to emotionally withdraw from the marriage, I think simply out of self-preservation. In addition to going out to bars with my buddies, I joined a gym, a badminton club, a golf club, and a hiking club. So sometimes in the evenings, Sarah would get home before me, and I assumed she worked from home on weekends. I didn't know for sure. I wasn't there most of the time. Then there were two major changes in Sarah's behavior. The impetus seemed to be the announcement that one of the partners was retiring and she was being considered for the position. First, she asked me for more time at home. Apparently, she missed me and loved me very much. At least, that's what she said. It only took 5 episodes of me coming home early to spend time with her to discover that nothing had changed. She was working late or had important homework to do. Strangely, I fully believed that she truly loved me, but her desire to be a partner trumped that love. The second strange change in behavior was her resurgent sex drive. She came to bed many times before I fell asleep, and even more, repeatedly woke me up. Whenever I asked her about these changes, she assured me it was to strengthen our relationship. She knew they were damaged and wanted to strengthen them. Then came the announcement that she was to attend a week-long contract negotiation in a city 3 hours away. She would leave on Sunday morning to prepare all the necessary materials in a hotel conference room, stay there all week, and return on Friday night. It was the culmination of months of work for Sarah, and those above her at the firm allowed her to present the work to clients. According to Sarah, if she closed the deal, the partnership was in her pocket. She then tried to torture me to death with sex the week before she attended said meeting. This brings me to the night before she left. I felt like our marriage was getting back on track, and being the loving husband that I am, I wanted to thank her for the previous week. Quitting golf after only 9 holes, I played like the last bastard and wasn't enjoying it anyway. I spent some time picking out the most romantic card I could find. Not knowing if I'd have the time and privacy at home to come up with suitable words of love, I spent 20 minutes in the car picking them out. I intended to put the card in her suitcase before she sealed it. Despite my detour and struggle with romantic words, I still arrived home an hour earlier than my usual time. Sarah was unpacking some shopping bags when I walked in the door and muttered, "Dave, you're early." She looked a little flustered. As I stepped to the opposite end of the kitchen to unpack my lunch container, she furtively placed a certain item from her bag on the counter, then, saying she needed to go to the bathroom, hurried upstairs. It was all very strange. 5 minutes later, she returned, placed the shopping bag on the table near the front door to carry to one of our cars. Entering the kitchen, she put her foot on the pedal of a garbage can with a hinged lid before carelessly tossing a crumpled piece of paper in there. Smiling, she came over and kissed me firmly on the lips before announcing that she'd be cooking something special for dinner, and then rushed off to her car to get something. I took advantage of her absence to retrieve a leaf from the trash can, slipped it into my pocket, and told her I was going upstairs to shower and change. The leaf, as it turned out, was the straw that broke the back of a once quite prosperous marriage. It had the name and logo of a discount drugstore chain printed on it. A receipt was wrapped in the sheet. What killed me was what was written on it. Trojan, regular 24-pack. My wife bought a 24-pack of condoms. Years ago, I had a vasectomy. My eyes could barely make out the drugstore product sign just below. Suddenly, I felt completely numb. I looked at my card, which I had intended to put in Sarah's suitcase, and felt nauseous at the words of love I had so carefully chosen. Shaking my head, I looked at Sarah's pre-packed suitcase on the bed. The top was closed, but not zipped. To hell with privacy. I pulled all the things out of the suitcase one by one, carefully. Plain underwear, a warm jacket, a business suit, 4 casual dresses of reasonable length that would be appropriate to wear away from my husband. The usual stuff, entirely appropriate for a business trip. But no condoms. None of the pockets have a back-zippered compartment, nor in the cosmetic bag, not yet fully packed. But they were in the inside pocket of the jacket, neatly folded in the middle of the stack, removed from the package and invisible to anyone not looking for them. In the same pocket was a thin package of Prevenar, which, judging by the fine print on the package, was a disposable morning-after pill. With shaky hands, I spread them out on the bed and took a quick picture before packing them back where I found them. Then, still more than a little dazed, I packed everything back into my suitcase before actually hopping in the shower. 24 fucking condoms. What kind of week had my wife planned? Did she plan to recruit a new soccer team every night? No, Sarah was not and never would be a promiscuous slut. But why the hell did she have 21 fucking morning after pills? Yes, condoms weren't 100% effective, and yes, accidents did happen. But surely if one condom broke, she would need one pill to save herself. Or if in the unlikely event she got pregnant, she could slip away and quietly terminate the pregnancy. She wasn't philosophically opposed to abortion. No, something else was going on here. Then, somehow, perhaps thanks to the constant stream of water pouring over my head, all the facts came together and I realized with certainty what was going on. She had been intending to sleep with someone, by the looks of it, for most of the week. She wasn't at all sure she could get her to wear condoms, so she had a backup plan for the morning after pill. This meant that whoever she intended to sleep with was in a more favorable position compared to her. Someone with good negotiating power to be able to make demands. I knew she intended to go on the trip with a couple of juniors from her team and Peter Walker, the senior partner. For a moment I thought she might use sex with someone from the client negotiation team, but very quickly dismissed the thought. Like I said, Sarah is not a slut. But what did she do if Peter Walker, a senior partner, waved a carrot in front of her? Told her that if she pulled this deal and gave him her body for a week, 20 years younger, the partnership would be hers. I wasn't sure our marriage could win that contest. Clearly the deal wasn't just for one night of betraying her virtue. It would have been a six-pack at most. What did Sarah do? I realized the choice she'd made by what I found in the suitcase. If I were a betting man, I'd say she'd made the decision about a month ago, and our resurgent sex life was intended both to make me stop questioning her behavior and as a handout to her conscience. So I benefited from her decision, too. Screw that. Jumping out of the shower and wiping myself dry, I carried my sleeping gear and laptop to the spare room. I sent a text to Sarah. I just threw up in the shower and I feel really bad. Don't want to make you sick before your big trip. I'm staying the night in the spare room. She responded by saying, I'm so sorry, dear, but thank you. Safely shutting her out, I pondered what to do. I was sure she hadn't cheated yet, but she was probably planning for the possibility. Once she did, we would be done. No, once she put her career before our marriage, we were already done. Her sleeping with someone else would just be the point of no return. She hasn't reached that point yet. I could go down and confront her face to face right now, and she would undoubtedly call the whole thing off. But that wouldn't answer anything. Nothing should be decided for her. I should let her go and see if she has dissolved the marriage or not. I did some research, booked a hotel, and then, oddly enough, fell asleep. I intentionally stayed in the room until Sarah left in her car to go to the hotel. When I got out of there, I found a nice note wishing her a speedy recovery and assuring her of my eternal love. Yeah, that's right. I pulled some stuff out of the hall closet, stuff from the kids' childhoods that we never threw away, then followed Sarah's route, an hour and a half behind her. I stopped halfway through to buy a couple of plain t-shirts. Putting one of the shirts on in the hotel parking lot, I used the rear-view mirror to put on a false mustache from an old childhood makeover box and a baseball cap I hadn't worn in years. After checking in, I asked if Mrs. Sarah Brown had checked in, but was told there was no such reservation. But after a little further investigation, they confirmed that one Mr. Peter Walker had checked in. Isn't it disgusting when you're right? I headed for the elevators when one of them opened, and Sarah, accompanied by Peter Walker himself, stepped out of the elevator. I bowed my head and followed them at a respectful distance to what turned out to be a conference room on the first floor. Sarah was carrying a bag with a laptop, Walker a box of what I assumed were presentation materials. Walker unlocked the door with his key, and they both stepped inside. As I passed the door, I noticed that he had left the key in the lock. I put it in my pocket, then went back inside, settled into a comfortable chair in the lobby, and waited. And indeed, an hour and a half later, they came to the front desk and got another key before disappearing into the elevator again. I gave them a 5-minute head start, and then carried my bag to my room. While I was there, Sarah called me, asked how I was doing, expressed disappointment that I was still sick, and then hung up, assuring me that she loved me. It didn't quite fit that 47 minutes later, she walked past me in the lobby, arm in arm with her boss, heading to the swankiest of the hotel's 2 restaurants, wearing a dress far sexier than the 4 I'd seen in her suitcase. I just sat there, hoping against all odds that Sarah wouldn't carry out her plan and ruin our marriage. My hopes crumbled an hour and 37 minutes later when they reappeared. Sarah was leaning on him and walking with a slightly unsteady gait. She always got drunk quickly. They entered the elevator, and just before the doors closed, she leaned over and kissed him on the lips, all discreetly captured by my phone's zoom lens. It looked like she was trying to pretend to herself that it wasn't as messy a business arrangement as it really was. I went to the hotel bar and drank alone to the dissolution of my marriage. I spent midnight indulging in memories of happy times and events in my marriage. There are so many of them. The other half was spent planning what to do next. We are all encouraged to think outside the box. I knew how most men would react, and I knew what reaction was expected of me, but I was going to turn the other way. The next day, I spent 3 hours in the hotel's business center printing out some pictures and then attaching them to magazines I bought in the lobby. I also made a little self-paced slideshow in PowerPoint. I may be a humble traditionalist, but don't ever think that makes me ignorant of computers. I felt comfortable around computers, more than comfortable. I knew that Sarah and Shithead, along with the dozen or so people they represented, were in their meeting room. When they left for the day, I snuck in using a stolen key. Sarah's laptop was plugged into the projector. I shook my head when I discovered it wasn't password protected. How many times had I told her? I figured out what she was doing in her presentation, then inserted my show after the 3rd slide. On my way out, I locked the door, then dripped some superglue on the locking mechanism. I then went back to my room, gathered my props, put on my best clothes, freshened up my disguise, and went back down to the lobby to wait. And indeed, at 7:05 p.m., they paraded through the lobby again. Sarah was wearing a black cocktail dress with a deep neckline I'd never seen before, complete with a string of pearls I'd bought her for our last anniversary. The thought of her using my gift, given with love, as a means of improving her appearance for her sloppy boss offended me. It made me feel used. Still, she looked good, and her escort seemed to appreciate it. They walked hand in hand into the Flash restaurant. This time I positioned myself so I could see where the waiter had seated them, which was a cozy little booth nestled in the corner. Very romantic. I gave them a 15-minute head start before I walked into the same restaurant, directing the waiter to a small table not far from their booth. I sat down on a chair across from them. They looked in my direction, but, thanks to my disguise, didn't recognize me, going back to giving each other their full attention. I'd never seen Sarah so attentive to another man before. She held his hand over the table with both of hers and seemed to catch his every word. He had a proud smile on his face, as if to say, "Look at me, guys. I can still attract a beautiful woman who is 20 years younger than me." I looked forward to wiping that smirk off his face. I was arranging my supplies on the table when the waiter who sat me down brought my drink. At the same time, Shithead's phone buzzed with an incoming text message, and he took Sarah's hands off his own to answer it. With a deft motion, I removed my wig, glasses, and false mustache and waited. I had stopped slouching, so my shoulders had regained their normal width, and my back straightened. Of course, Sarah's eyes wandered around the room while Shithead was distracted. Knowing her as well as she knew herself, she was checking to see if she was the prettiest one in the room. I was looking right at her when her gaze slid in my direction. It was funny as hell, the way her lower jaw almost hit the table. The blood had completely drained from her face, and there was an expression of horror. I saw her have the urge to tell her companion about me, but she held back. She knew I knew about Peter being married. If this whole thing fell apart, her chances of becoming a partner were 0 squared. To add to her confusion, I smiled at her and waved slightly. I could feel what was going on in her head. Dave saw me holding hands with my boss, wearing a dress he hadn't seen before. Devastating, but not fatal with a little brain work. I lowered my gaze to the desk in front of me and picked up the first of my props. It was a magazine. Don't ask me which one, on the front cover of which I had pasted the first printout. I picked it up as if reading it, and of course I unfolded it with the cover facing Sarah. On the cover was a glossy advertisement for Prevenar morning after pills. It told her unequivocally that I knew the premeditation of her actions. To pass it all off as explainable was no longer possible. I made sure to keep the smile on my face. Sarah turned to shithead but quickly changed her mind again. I could see that she was considering standing up, but that would make Peter wary and the situation would be out of her control. Things were already like this, but she didn't know it yet. I could imagine the excuses and justifications rolling around in her head. Putting the first magazine aside, I picked up the second. With this picture, I had to create a picture from scratch. I had never seen such a picture. I doubted it existed until today. It vividly illustrated a concept familiar to anyone who has ever read stories of infidelity, including myself and Sarah. Her gaze slid over my mangled journal. Sure, it took 10 magazines and looked a hell of a lot like a ransom note, but to me it was a work of art I was proud of. A con man's handbook. She looked at it, my work of art, and unbelievably her skin took on an even more greenish hue. She knew now that none of her excuses would work. Suddenly she looked very scared. Now she was aware that I knew she was having a premeditated affair with her boss, and I wasn't going to listen to her excuses. It was time to let her know that I knew exactly what her motivation was. It was the third magazine, again with a completely fabricated cover. Looking up at the glass ceiling lying on my back, soon appeared to its audience as one petrified man. This was followed by a copied sheet, Divorce in 10 Simple Steps, which told Sarah exactly what the consequences of her actions would be. So, in 4 simple pictures, Sarah realized that there was no point in denying that she was having an affair, that I knew why she was doing it, that we were headed for divorce, and none of the standard excuses would make one iota of difference to the outcome. I could see that the realization of the doom of the marriage was getting through to her. But she was a fighter, and it was simply not in her character to give up without spending 110% of her efforts. I saw her pat Peter's arm, trying to get his attention off the phone. It was then that the 5th journal appeared. How likely is a murder conviction if no body was found? At this point, I decided I'd had my fun, finished my drink, and started gathering my props. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw that Sarah had finally managed to get Peter Asshole Walker's attention. He looked over and suddenly looked as sick as she did. I stood up, put the last sheet on their table, and walked out. On it was written, "Mrs. Walker, we need to talk." Heading for the exit, I watched him hurry after me through the fancy mirror by the restaurant door. Sarah remained at their table. When he burst into the lobby, I was just turning down the hallway leading to the conference rooms. I rounded the first corner, then turned around and waited. I had no idea what the hell his fighting skills were, so as soon as he sped around the corner, I drove my knotted fist right into his face. He fell to the ground, curled up and groaned, blood oozing from between his fingers. I stepped over him and headed for my room. 10 minutes later, I saw an ambulance pull up, but there was no police car. 30 minutes after that, I saw Sarah check out and drag her suitcase to the hotel parking lot. Their plan was predictable. Sarah was to follow me home, beg, plead, or threaten me not to go public and tell Shithead's wife while he stayed here and tried to salvage the deal. Well, I went back to my room, opened the bottle of bourbon I had bought, turned off my phone, and spent the evening as pleasantly as I could under the circumstances. Epilogue. The next day, I went down to the first floor for lunch. The conference room door was open, all my personal belongings were gone, and the cleaning ladies were deep cleaning. I hoped that meant my plan had worked. In her hurry to leave, Sarah had either decided to leave her laptop behind or couldn't open the door with the propped lock. The shithead took charge of the presentation after gaining access to the room. 3 slides after the presentation started, the group of slides I had inserted was on with a quick autoplay. The first slide was a picture of Sarah and Peter kissing in an elevator 2 nights earlier, captioned "Sarah and Peter." The second slide consisted of a photograph of 24 condoms and a package of Prevenar on a bedspread. The caption to this photo read, "Sarah came prepared for a week with her boss." The third slide was a double slide. On the left was a picture of me, and on the right was a picture of Peter's wife from her Facebook page. It was signed, "Sarah's husband and Peter's wife." The fourth and final slide said, "Do you really want to do business with people like this?" I timed the presentation at only 8 seconds. Hopefully that was too short for Peter to turn everything off in time. If the presence of an empty room was any indication, the deal was off. Oh dear, how sad. Oh well, never mind. I sent a copy of the presentation to Peter's wife from the hotel lobby before spending a couple days sightseeing. Sarah wasn't putting too much effort into trying to avoid divorce. I even got good terms by promising not to tell our children, relatives, and friends about Sarah's behavior. There was no alimony, as she made more money than I did. She wasn't fired, but I heard a couple years later that she never made partner. I did get a pretty sincere apology from her, and she was obviously berating herself for ruining a good marriage for career reasons. Within minutes of learning of Sarah's intentions, I decided that forgiveness was out of the question. Sure, I could have stopped her by simply telling her I knew what she was planning, but what was the point? Either she had to decide that our marriage was more important than partnership, or it was over between us. And since that decision was not in my favor, given Sarah's negligent behavior last year and refusal to engage in any action to revive the marriage, that was fine. I'd start a relationship with Gail from the badminton club, or Michaela from the golf club, or Joyce or Jane from the hiking club, or even the new admin girl at work, or